So we already know from the gray literature or the unpublished literature that there is an effect of generative AI on business productivity that's pretty huge. There's two authors, Noi and Zhang, 2023, assigned a writing task to a bunch of workers and then split the people into two groups using ChatGPT or not using ChatGPT. People who use ChatGPT spent an average of 10 minutes less for a task that took non-users 30 minutes. So not only was this work faster output, but it was higher quality output. So if this generalizes to all writing tasks, that means that you could save up to 160 minutes a day if you were just writing all day long. That's time that can be reclaimed to think, study, create, produce. In other words, make an impression on your employer and build out your portfolio. So my ultimate goal is to turn that half of non-users into users so that they can benefit from these tools.
Hey friends, welcome back to Public Health Careers. Today we're chatting with Pat Leomi. Pat is Chief AI Educator at Boston AI Learning Hub and a Doctor of Education student in Integrative Studies at Northeastern University. Pat is an emerging expert in generative AI as a catalyst for public health workforce development, as well as a doctoral researcher focusing on developing and understanding of how generative AI can be integrated into existing systems. He conferred an Associate of Arts at South Seattle College, a Bachelors of Science in Psychology at Seattle University, a Master of Public Health and Healthcare Management at Boston University, and is a current doctoral student in Education, Integrative Studies at Northeastern University. In today's episode, you'll hear and learn more about generative AI being a catalyst for public health and how you can leverage it, how Pat used AI to support him in getting into his doctoral program, and becoming the Chief AI Educator to share skills for organizations and people to better leverage AI, as well as much, much more. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and leave a review. I hope you enjoyed today's episode.
Hey, this is Pat Leomi. I'm a Chief AI Educator and so much more, and you are listening to Public Health Careers.
Pat, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here. I know people may have heard your name before when you came on the National Public Health Week panel, new tools and innovations, I think, in public health. And I'm really looking forward to diving more into your story and how you would be able to build up that expertise to talk to public health and artificial intelligence and all those things.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited for you to be here. So to jump into things, how do you identify and tell us a little about your personal background?
Yeah, so I use he, him pronouns, and I come from the 253 area code in the Pacific Northwest, which is Steilacoom, Washington, if you're familiar with the area. If not, Tacoma. If not, Seattle. So it's cascading importance there. Haven't lived there for a while, though. I moved to Boston, Massachusetts in 2017. And outside of public health, there are three things that I get involved with. One is I'm a home chef. I love cooking Italian and East Asian food. I love anime and manga. One Piece and My Hero Academia are two of the best things ever produced. And I'm a big AI fanatic, as you'll see today and through our continued conversation.
Love it. I think it's so cool when people have all like these varied interests, and because as we all know, we're just like people who have so many different unique attributes and things that we enjoy in life. Well, what's your favorite meal to cook?
I've really gotten into making bao, like barbecue beef buns. Those are really delicious. But I make it with the West Coast spin, where it's got barbecue sauce in it rather than just the meat by itself.
Interesting. Have you seen? I think there's like a Disney short with the bows in it. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah. I saw it a while ago, but I can't remember it for the life of me right now.
Yeah, fair enough. I think I rewatched it recently, and I want to say it came out like a long time. It might have been a decade ago that it came out. I could be wrong. Someone fact check me on that. But anyway, you spoke a lot about on the panel around how AI gives unlimited power and gives us just so many possibilities, especially in the world of public health. And I would love for you to share more about what generative AI is and how it can be a catalyst for public health.
Yeah, absolutely. So generative AI is AI that can create new things based off of what it's already been trained on. So you give it a whole bunch, like a library of information, and then you tell it to reproduce something. Well, not reproduce, you tell it to make something, and it will create it from nothing. Sometimes it can be lightly inspired by something in the real world. Like if you ask the image generator to produce a blue hedgehog, it comes up with Sonic the Hedgehog almost perfectly. But most of the time, it produces unique, original stuff. But in public health, like you said, it has endless potential to improve health. It's a creative thought partner that can help you outline, brainstorm, synthesize, develop messaging, strengthen your English skills by helping with writing. You can also use it as a conversation pal to augment your argument generation, and then translation and practicing language, as well as improved healthcare through. We've seen a little bit of improved symptom pattern identification in hospitals, and then we see people using it pretty frequently as a low cost therapy supplement. But there's a huge asterisk there because we're not quite there yet. We need IRB approved research to safely use AI for that use.
That's a vast array of things that are capable with AI, and just like how it intersects with so many different ways that we are doing public health or will be doing public health. And I think it's important to just understand that. And one of the things that really stood out to me from the panel conversation was the fact that you said like AI is going to create the opportunity for people in other places to publish in certain journals because it's going to help them with their English. And I think that is a huge benefits to all of the scientific community when people are able to share their information, and it's just more open access, and well, maybe not open access, but open ability to really dive and share the information that you're learning from the research that you're doing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. I think that the potential for non-English native speakers is so phenomenal. Just you can practice, like I could go on and have the conversation in Spanish with it, and it can do a pretty good job of it. And it's just like that type of tool available for free or $20 a month if you want the plus membership. That's phenomenal.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I'm excited to see how AI does transform and like the uptake rate of it into just the things that we think about that are essential. So we will see how that is, and I think like to the end of you sharing like a low cost therapy solution, and then I think the bigger question is there's like the ethical part of it. Who is training the AI? Where is it getting that knowledge from? What are the biases there? And these are all the considerations that we have to think about when we are doing this AI and public health.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you talk to us more about generative AI in the application of workforce development?
Yeah, so like I talked about the last time I was on, there's this theory called diffusion of innovation, where basically half of all people pick up new tools immediately and use them. And then there's another half that waits until super late, if at all. And that's a problem because skilled use of things like ChatGPT can help users get a leg up on their non user competition. So we already know from the gray literature or the unpublished literature that there is an effect of generative AI on business productivity that's pretty huge. There's two authors, Noi and Zhang, 2023, assigned a writing task to a bunch of workers and then split the people into two groups using ChatGPT or not using ChatGPT. People who use ChatGPT spent an average of 10 minutes less for a task that took non-users 30 minutes. So not only was this work faster output, but it was higher quality output. So if this generalizes to all writing tasks, that means that you could save up to 160 minutes a day if you were just writing all day long. That's time that can be reclaimed to think, study, create, produce, In other words, make an impression on your employer and build out your portfolio. So my ultimate goal is to turn that half of non-users into users so that they can benefit from these tools. But there is one important caveat. The gray literature, like I mentioned above, is not published literature, meaning it's not peer reviewed. So you got to ask the questions like, is this measure generalizable? Did they introduce any bias? These are very important questions that peers would ask before we decided that ChatGPT is definitively better for productivity. But at face value, it intuitively makes sense that using a tool will help you get the job done faster and better if it's the right tool for the job.
I like hearing that, and the distinction in the peer review versus not peer reviewed, and when we are looking at article research that isn't peer reviewed, what are the things that we have to look at more stringently, and like the methods, and what are the kind of biases that they could have introduced into the work. And I could imagine that ChatGPT is something that a lot more students, people in the workforce, are actually using to support them in doing their work. I know that I've definitely been using it a lot more and trying to get better at using it in just being able to help me with my productivity and maybe like just brainstorming a lot of things like this. So people who mightn't have not used it as yet, what kinds of ways would you tell them to get involved or to learn about ChatGPT and how they can use it?
Yeah, there's a ton of ways. At the end of the podcast, I'm going to name off a couple YouTubers that I think are pretty influential and important. But really, just thinking about using it, just trying it, you have to start with say hi, say how are you, and go from there. You could use ChatGPT, Gemini, which is produced by Google, or Claude, which is produced by, I think, like Anthropology or something like that. I think that's a clothing store, but it's close to that. But it's a dialogue, and that's what is very important to understand. And it's something that my wife says that most people that she talks to don't ever get, is that once you say hi, you can then say, how are you? And then you can say, well, actually, I want to talk to you about the missile crisis in such and such place, and completely switch it and have a conversation about that topic. And just explore.
Absolutely. And I know most recently I used it to create a title and objectives, or like to help me clarify a title and objectives for a presentation that I'll be doing. And of course, like I adjusted words and did things, but it really did create like and it created too much information at first, actually, but it gave me a better idea of what I needed to include and how I can use this to like create more. And of course, this wasn't the last product that I used. I definitely edited it and went online and looked at other resources to see like what are the specific words that I should be using to cater to public health, to the type of audience that I was working with. But to that point, it is something that is very, very helpful. And one of the things that I always do is like, okay, this is what I want you to do. Ask me 5 questions like to help you clarify, to better support me, and like really getting deep and granular on those things, and it gives you a lot richer information in that way and more specific to whatever task you have at hand.
Yeah, and you can literally tell it you are a public health researcher, and that will help it get the context to have it then use more public health related words. And then you can say, be succinct, and it'll start producing less information. But your little hack that you just said is my favorite by far, is to tell it to ask you questions until it's satisfied that it has enough information to produce a high quality whatever it is that you're trying to make.
Absolutely. And I know that we could talk about this for a very long time, and maybe we'll try to figure out a way to just talk about ChatGPT or AI in our public health in another conversation. But getting into the public health conversation, what does public health mean to you?
Helping people live longer, healthier lives. It's that simple, but when in practice, it's a lot more than that. So improving access to preventative healthcare services like dentistry, early detection systems, and healthier food options, or altering laws that affect harmful things for you. So, changing flight trajectories to reduce the impact of sound on health, introducing green spaces to reduce urban heating, doing things that help people whether they know it or not. I like to think of us as like vigilantes helping in the background, but never getting credit unless something actually bad happens.
Before we get back to the show, are you passionate about public health and looking to elevate your career, brand, and impact? Join the public health community today. Gain exclusive access to career boosting events, connect with like-minded professionals, and stay ahead with the latest trends in public health. Plus, enjoy mentorship and career support to help you thrive. You'll even learn tips and tricks on how I grew my LinkedIn by 2,000 followers in the last 6 weeks. Sign up before the end of May to lock in your membership at the current rate before prices go up. Don't miss out on this opportunity to grow and connect. Join us at thephmillennial.com/join or in the link in the description and be part of our vibrant community dedicated to making a difference in public health. Let's build a stronger future together. Now back to the show. Absolutely. I recently posted on LinkedIn because there was this CDC, I think it's newsroom report that was put out on like data modernization and some of the key achievements that have happened so far. And I haven't seen anyone talking about it. So I was like, these are the times when we can share information on things that are going well and the systems that we have been complaining about. At least some action is being taken. But to the point is people always focus on the negative things. But we need to really like shift that narrative and continue to have the conversation about public health and its impact when things are going well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we're going to get into your career story. So before you even got your associate's or your bachelor's degree, you were a communication systems specialist at the U.S. Army and then a certified leading coach. Tell us about that progression.
Yeah, so I joined the Army at 18 for a number of reasons, but the most important for today is I just wanted to help people. So I signed up for 4 years active and 4 years in the National Guard, and I took on the role of a 25 Lima, which is called a cable systems installer maintainer. But when I post on public forums, I call it communication systems specialist because it gives you a better hint at what I did. It's basically a fancy way of saying person who hooks up your internet. So I actually didn't end up doing much when I was on active duty because my job was obsolete. We don't need wires connecting everything in this digital age that we're in. So I spent a lot of time people watching, and I became fascinated with the effects of socioeconomic status on health behaviors. For example, the rampant tooth decay among particularly uneducated, poor, white enlisted soldiers. I was very interested in this, but I didn't know what to do with that yet. Then I tried a semester of college while I was actually in, and I studied on a base, but it felt more like a high school than a college, and I wanted a genuine experience, so I decided to pause after one semester. Once I got out and onto the National Guard part of my contract, that means that I serve stateside in support of the local government. And the first thing I did was I tried school again, but I failed after a semester because I had no focus. I thought I wanted to be an artist because I, quote, didn't want to work for a living. And I failed in that plan because my heart wasn't in it. And it's actually really hard to do art. So I became a server at Red Robin, got promoted to a trainer role pretty quickly as a certified learning coach, which is like a week-long training session. And I became even more interested in people because hunger is real. People who get hungry and angry, it goes away with eating, and it's super fascinating. They just blow up at you, and then all of a sudden they're the most kind people and apologetic. But later that year, the restaurant closed for renovations, which was my first major decision point, and that was whether or not I would continue in food service or go on to school. And I chose school to study psychology because of that people watching. I finally had a sense of what I wanted to do.
So the people watching throughout your journey, and thank you for sharing that. So the people watching throughout your journey, because what was the shift in maybe like the focus? Was it that you knew that you were interested in like people and just how, and you wanted to learn more about how people think, operate in the world, and then
Yeah, it was a lot of different factors that went into this. So when I was in the army on active duty, I was in Germany and I found an intro to psychology textbook. And I brought it with me when I deployed to Iraq, and I actually read it in full, page to page or cover to cover. And I was like, wow, this is cool. You can explain everything about everyone. Um, and then I tried it when I did that first quarter of school in the army. But when I got out, it just like something left my mind. I lost that excitement. But then I think it was the girl I was talking to or dating at the time. She was like a sounding board for what I might be interested in. And I think she might have been the one who said psychology is what you like. And it stuck.
so you got your Bachelors of Science in Psychology at Seattle University. While you were there, you were an adult education program coordinator. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so there's two parts to that story. The first is I originally started as a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology. I thought I was too dumb to take science classes, but I worked up the courage to take a course on biopsychology and I rocked it. And I immediately switched to a Bachelor of Science in Psychology to take more science heavy courses, which led me to fall in love with research. And I decided at that point in time I would become a researcher. So I started telling everyone I could possibly tell that I was interested in research, that I wanted to do this. Didn't care if they were a student, professor, or someone completely unaffiliated. I would tell them I want to be a researcher. And finally, it paid off where I got a research assistantship with a professor, which opened the door to becoming a work study research assistant, getting paid to work at SEIU 775 Benefits Group. That's a company that helps people train and provide resources to home health aides, so a very public health focused organization. I streamlined some processes, got promoted twice in a year, first to full time and then to adult education program coordinator. And in that capacity, I was responsible for helping with the rollout of a new program that they designed. But I left probably about 2 months after I got promoted because I was like, I need to focus on my final semester of school or I'm going to fail. So that was another decision point.
I'm grateful that you mentioned you found out that hey, I want to be a researcher, and then I'm like screaming it everywhere, telling everyone that I want to be a researcher because I think it's important to have some sort of idea of what we want to do and like tell people about it because you never know what kind of opportunities will come your way from doing that, and just by seeing it makes you want to do the things that a researcher does to classify and actually be true to your statement like hey, I want to be a researcher, let me do and become a researcher. And I like that. I like that a lot because I think too many people don't know what they want to do, and I feel like to the end point, it doesn't even matter if you want to do that thing specifically, but just having some sort of goal helps you get in that direction and helps you when you're talking to people in that vein.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I wanted to ask about because you said that you didn't want to do science-based classes because you were too dumb. As we clearly know that is not the case. So maybe someone is in that same situation where they're maybe entering into the undergrad or the master's program and they think they're too dumb to take on certain classes. What kind of advice or thoughts would you share with them?
I would say the university is your playground. That is where you can go to try out new ideas and see what sticks. It's the only time in your life where you pay to have people judge you about what you're doing. So why not take advantage of it and make an effort and say why not? And I know this won't speak to everyone out there because some people take that extra little bit of pushing to get there. But for a lot of people, they've just never heard this. So this could be the first time that they've heard, oh, I should try it because it worked for me and I think it can work for you too.
Thank you. You also shared that you stopped going to school while you were on base because you said it felt too much like a high school. Did you enjoy the college experience that you had at Seattle University?
Absolutely. It was phenomenal. So we jumped one point, and that was I went back for my associate's degree at South Seattle College, and that took a year and a half because once I had a goal in mind, it went super quick. I loved it, and it became every part of me. And I've fallen in love with education, and it's taken me a long time to figure that out, that what I actually want to be doing is working in education and public health. Like that's the two buckets that I want to be in, and I'm trying to figure out how to merge that appropriately right now.
Fair enough. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for that and need for that. So I appreciate that work that you're doing. Before we move on, were there any undergrad takeaways that you wanted to share?
You already hit it on the nose. I was going to say, talk about what you want frequently, loudly, openly, and obnoxiously. Because if you don't speak up, nobody can help you reach your goals. And then I would also say, office hours are there to help you. Professors set this time aside for you, so you should use it. I was terrified to use office hours the entire time I was in my associate's degree program, and I probably could have done better if I had just reached out and asked for help.
And you're paying for office hours as well. So there's that.
Yes.
So after undergrad, you became a research coordinator at Cambridge Health Alliance. Tell us about that opportunity.
Yeah, so that was me moving from Seattle to Boston. My cousin texted me one day out of the blue and said, "Hey, do you want to move to Boston?" And I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I asked my brother, "Should I do this?" And he said, "Go visit, make it tangible." So I packed up everything the next weekend and I flew out to Boston, and I fell in love with it. It was amazing coming to the city. The architecture is so beautiful. Just the modern up against the like just everything else. It's if you haven't seen it, it's worth coming to visit. But I at that point I immediately decided I was going to move here for grad school because it's the center of academia. Had no idea what type of grad school I wanted to go to, but I figured I would figure it out as a researcher. So I got a job in addiction research at Division on Addiction at Cambridge Health Alliance. And it was the first formal time I heard the word public health. And I became very excited about communicating science to the public. It was a huge part of my job. And eventually it came time to apply for grad school. But like a good psychology major, I followed the path of I should apply for clinical psychology programs. It's this thing that happens to most degree programs. There's one thing in your field that you think that you need to do, and no one tells you otherwise, so you follow that path. And I didn't get in anywhere. Nobody accepted me because I couldn't pinpoint a subfield that I was interested in. So I get rejected from everybody. I meet with a colleague and explain that I have this interest in helping people and observing people. And she says, "Well, have you thought about getting a Master of Public Health?" And so I said, "Great." And I applied and I got in.
I love that. I love that. And I think it's really important that people hear this like from just the perspective of, you might think that you want one thing, you apply, you see that as a failure, you learn more about another field, and then you apply, you get into it, and then you learn that a lot of the work that you want to do is in the intersection of this field and education, as you kind of shared more about. So you got your Masters of Public Health and Healthcare Management at Boston University.
Yep.
Was there any more to the thought process than you shared just now to go to BU?
There was. So, against my better intuition, I didn't study mental health, which is like this through string that we've seen throughout everything I've talked about so far. I decided to go against everything that I felt I should do, and I studied healthcare management to get practical skills in management. I thought that that would be a way to have an automatic career trajectory that is always good for life. Um, and at the same time, I applied to be a writing fellow at Public Health Post, doing that science writing that I had done for the division on addiction, and I became a really good writer. I'm pretty confident in my skills. And then at the same time, someone invited me to be their TA for a course on leadership and management. And I fell in love with teaching graduate students, so I continued to do it for 4 semesters. And I think that's about all the thought that went into that.
And what made you fall in love with teaching students?
Seeing them light up when I have something to say, like having a unique idea that's based on my unique experience that I can then turn around and say, and someone can take that and use that as tangible evidence to do something, that makes me feel incredible. It just like standing in front of a room is just like, it makes me light up. I get so excited about it.
And you shared that you are also a writing fellow with the Public Health Post, who I only like recently learned about them on LinkedIn, maybe like 2 weeks ago.
Mhm.
And I was reading through some of their articles. I love that platform, and I wish there were more platforms like that at other schools and stuff like that. What maybe are some of the big things that you would share about maybe writing better or sharing more things to public?
No one likes to hear this, but it takes practice. It takes dedicated practice. I was writing 1 article a week for an entire year, but I didn't produce, what is that, 64 news articles, 50, however many weeks are in a year.
52.
Jesus. I'm bad with math. Anyway, I didn't have 52 posts. I had like, I think 15, maybe 15 max, or 30 max. Just because I would write something and they would come back to me and they'd say, no, this is awful. You need to do this again, in kinder words. But having that practical element and having someone to write to is very important. Having someone that you can say things and have them then turn around and tell you whether or not it's good. And then finally, I would say reading your work out loud was the biggest skill that I got practice with, which was just literally reading every single word out loud and rewriting it if you can't follow the 1 breath rule, which is if you can't say it in under a breath, you shouldn't be saying it. It's really hard for researchers, but it's a practice skill that now I can be very succinct, and except when I'm rambling on a podcast.
That is the very, very real. I like that, like the having someone to give you feedback while you're writing it, as well as being more succinct. That is one of the things that I talk about extensively. I know I spoke about it recently on one of my brand calls in my community. Is just researchers have a lot of good information. They mightn't know how to communicate that information in a succinct and impactful way, and I think that is just because how research and academia is set up. But when you're communicating like outside of that means, and you're trying to communicate on, let's say, like LinkedIn or any other kind of like platform where it's like more regular type of people, I feel like people are very long-winded, and they need to figure out ways to be more succinct to carry across the message and make it impactful. But I feel like there's a lot to talk about in that, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's extremely important. If more schools did this, I think that you would have a very strong workforce of communicators. I will talk about when I became a psychology instructor a little later, but I actually made a course assignment that was a semester-long assignment based on that skill to develop people's writing skills of writing for the public. And they worked with 1 single research article for the entire semester, but they became very intimately knowledgeable and much better writers because of it.
Right. I love that. And yeah, I think there's a lot to do in teaching public health people how to better write and communicate with audiences in a way that it really reaches them and really touches them in an impactful way. So a lot to do there. You also shared that you wanted to get the management concentration or the healthcare management concentration because you wanted more like tangible skills as opposed to maybe like the mental health. in the end, did you see more value in that, or was that something that you'd reconsider?
So I think for some people it is extremely valuable. Following something practical, that's people do it all the time, and I don't want to badmouth anyone who would do that because that is a legitimate way to go about your career trajectory. But for me, it doesn't work. We've seen in my associate's program and now at the master's level where I didn't have a goal in mind and it really screwed me up because I wasn't clear and devoted to something. The skills that I learned are phenomenal skills, like strategic thinking, operational management, and not math apparently, but everything else like really helped me with how I approach my work. But I still wish that I had a focus because I could take that to potential employers and have them actually see that I care about what I'm doing because it's really hard to communicate that right now.
That makes sense, and that's valid. And I feel like it all depends on like your perspective and you personally, because I am also someone who came from a biology background and was like, okay, I'm
Right.
not gonna take the epithets stuff. I'm gonna go like high level health management and policy. And to your point, like to try to gain a lot of those tangible skills that you really have, because I wasn't able to get that through my bachelor's degree. But I don't think there's any right answer. It's like really about preference in what you are doing there. So that makes sense. And before we move on, were there any takeaways from your MPH program?
Just like I was hinting at, that practicality works for some, but not everyone. And if it hasn't worked for you in the past, definitely don't follow the practical path when you're at this level, especially if you're paying for it out of pocket, because that is a costly mistake that you can make. But to caveat this, I will say all of my classmates who went on to have a career in healthcare management are flourishing. They're doing phenomenally, and that's because they actually really cared about what they were doing.
That makes sense. That makes sense. I appreciate you sharing that. And then you had a career transition. You took a break from work to pursue a law school and decided to terminate your education after one semester. Tell us about that thought process.
It was an awful idea. So the job search was taking a while. I think I was like 3 months in, still hadn't heard anything, and I was like, I guess I need more education. That's the one thing that's stopping me from getting a job, and not reflecting on the fact that I wasn't passionate about it. So I liked my policy and law class in my program at BU. Great professor. She made it good. But I tried out being a lawyer. It was the worst decision yet. It was dry, bland, boring. It's not the social sciences. If you have any romanticism about having context and interest in what you're reading, law is not for you because it has no context. It's just here's the facts, cut and paste, and now I'm going to fall asleep while I'm reading, and then I'm going to get really anxious about it. And I was anxious all semester because I just was so scared that I was going to fail. I ended up getting like a C in my classes, and I was just like, "This is it. I'm good." It's a very expensive mistake too. It like doubled my student loans one semester.
Ooh,
Yeah.
wow. Wow. Well, I think a lot of lessons and insights there is like really being intentional in making that decision, knowing if you're going to go into it, like this is investment that you have to actually, I don't know, if you want it to get the most out of it, you have to really like be intentional in that decision.
Yeah.
But at the same point in time, knowing that it wasn't your path and being strong enough to make that decision to step away and say this isn't going to be a good fit for me in the long run, so let me really figure out what I can do to figure out what was the next step. And I guess like that is my question to you. So when you were making that transition to say I'm going to not go to law school next semester, what was your thought process and how did you go about looking for your next opportunity?
Um, at that point, I decided to open up the floodgates and just apply to anything that I seemed qualified for. I stopped restricting it to the field of public health, and I just started more broadly saying, okay, do they want a master's or do they want a bachelor's? Do I have the years of experience to qualify for this? And that can be challenging with my work history because I have this really windy trajectory where I got really great experiences, but it's really hard to communicate that in a one-page cover letter. So that's been a challenge. But I ended up getting a job as a research associate at a college that I will not name because on the first day, my manager came up to me and said, I don't care if I get fired. It was a toxic work environment for the next 2 months. I go get married. I come back. I'm there for 2 days. I turn in an assignment that they gave me 2 days to work on that normally takes a week. I messed it up. It was the first time I did it. They fired me. So, law school, fired, and then completely lost. So, I was really stuck in a big rut. And so what I ended up doing was I contacted Mass Hire, which is a state-sponsored free career coach that everyone who's from Massachusetts on this call, I think everyone qualifies for. There might be certain stipulations, but I got a career coach and explained to him my interest in helping people and love of teaching graduate students. And he asked me, have you ever thought about being a trainer or an adjunct professor? And that translates to Lasell University.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I'm glad you got out of the toxic workspace. That is ridiculous, crazy, and sorry that you had to deal with that. And it's interesting to hear that trajectory, as well as you shared earlier that you really enjoyed being a graduate teaching assistant and seeing that light up, and now coming back to okay, let me work with this coach and get clarity. And in getting that clarity, it was coming back to that thing that you did find joy in it.
Yeah.
So you became an adjunct professor in psychological perspectives at Lasell University. Tell us more about what you did there, what you enjoyed.
Yeah, I'll give a little background on that because I'm very proud of what I did to get that job, which is I went through Wikipedia and identified every single school in the nation that had a psychology department, and I applied for the entire month of December to every single program that I could find. I ended up sending out 30 different ones, but I applied, and one of the very last ones that I got was Lasell University because we were 2 weeks out from the start of the semester and they didn't have a professor yet. So they were willing to take a chance on an unexperienced professor at that time who was willing to go in person because it was COVID still. So there was that dynamic in the process of people not wanting to do it. So I get hired. I have 2 weeks to build a syllabus, create all my PowerPoints, and get it done. I spent 40 hours a day just working through everything to do this. And then I taught 24 students, and it was the most fun job I've ever had. It is a career I absolutely want to pursue, both undergraduates and graduates. More preference for graduates, but phenomenal. Absolutely.
Well, I'm glad that you did share that, because that is the intentionality and the perseverance that I think a lot of people need to hear and do. Is what are all the psychology programs? Let me apply to the ones that fit my criteria. And then even from that, it is the opportunity came to you that this one program had space and they were willing to take a chance on you. And I think those things just don't happen to people just like that. It's
Yeah.
I feel like many times we have to be putting in the initiative for the universe to sometimes meet us halfway and say, hey, here's the opportunity that you're looking for. And then from that, I I could only imagine what those 2 weeks were building an entire syllabus curriculum. That might have been crazy.
It was nice to have something to do. I'll say that.
Fair enough. And maybe to that point, do you have any tips or things around building syllabi or curriculums?
Use ChatGPT. That's a skill I've been teaching one of my classmates pretty recently, that you can do the ask me questions thing with that, and it'll help you build out the syllabus. And then you can say, now give me a lesson plan for a class on this topic that you gave me. And then you can say, give me a PowerPoint outline for that. And then you can say, give me a script for that. So you can just keep iterating on it and building. And I think traditional approaches to building a syllabus are no longer valid, because this is just so much more effective, and you can edit it however much you want. And I think that's the key thing, is you don't have to take the output. You can do whatever you want with it.
Love it, love it, and I think that's a great suggestion and a way that we should be approaching a lot more things. Even just to give us like the foundation, what we build. As you say, and this is a tool that we need to use and utilize. So yeah, that's awesome. And then after being an adjunct professor, you became a program specialist at Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard. How you come across this and what you do in it?
Yeah, so I applied to MIT for a communication lab role. They've got a series of like 8 communication labs that provide science writing support to employees, students at MIT, employees at the Broad. I didn't get the job, but I made such a good impression on my interviewer that she referred me to the Broad, because I gave like a really great presentation that I put a lot of effort into. But ultimately, she was like, I need someone who has a little bit more experience, but my colleague has someone who has a position for you. So I get into a sister lab. Best job I've ever had. Like, best company I've ever worked for. Great benefits, impressive learning culture, great people. My job was writing nomination letters for awards, which I admittedly did very little of because I didn't really like that part of the role, which I'll get to in a moment. And then project managed 7 programs. And then I was the assistant manager for the communication lab. But like I said, ultimately, I couldn't get passionate about the life sciences. So, like, doing the award letter writing, I had to read and consume the literature on life sciences. And just like law, it wasn't for me. And it took me 2 years to finally decide that that was enough. And it came down to a personality test. I took the insights training, I think is what it's called. And it assigns you a color for your personality. There's 4 colors, 8 if you want to get fancy, but 4 colors. And I was the lowest rating on the one skill I needed for that job, which is like a very data centric mindset. And I don't have that. I'm very much a like idea generalist. I like to grab things and synthesize things. I don't like data. So I took that as a sign, and I quit in January.
That makes sense, and I think that's awesome. That it could be like a great job, and there are a lot of great things in the job, and at the same time, just not be the personality fit for what you would ideally like to do, and all of that is okay. So you are currently a Doctor of Education student in Integrative Studies at Northeastern University, as well as your Chief AI Educator at Boston AI Learning Lab. Which one came first of all, and then tell us more about the Doctor of Education?
Yeah, so the doctorate came first. It all has cascaded in a really rapid pace, in a way that I think is great. So I've always wanted a doctorate. I didn't think I was smart enough, but clearly I've made it through the trajectory. Um, I've wanted one because it's the pinnacle of knowledge. It's becoming an expert on something that you care about, and to me, that is like very important. You can then turn around and become a teacher or do anything with that expert knowledge. So I developed a really strong taste for training and higher education over the last few years. In February of 2023, I decided to apply to Northeastern's online Doctorate of Education program to study the intersection of accommodation and mental health. I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to go back and I'm going to study mental health and I'm going to finally get back on the track that I originally started years ago. When I applied to the program, I got help from ChatGPT. I had never heard of a problem of practice before, so I asked ChatGPT to give me an example of what it was based on my research interest, and what it produced was almost exactly like what I had already come up with on my own. And so I made a few tweaks modeled off that example, and I got into the program, and I fell in love with AI. I started using it all the time, basically every day since. I don't know if a week has gone by without using it. So I start the program, and the very first quarter, I meet someone who's studying AI, and I immediately said, "Wait, I can do that? Like that's something I can do." So I immediately changed my mind and said, "This is what I need to pursue. This is the thing that I've been working toward." So what I wanted to study was how to integrate generative AI training into workforce development, specifically through the lenses of educators and public health professionals. After leaving my job in February or January, I had a lot of time on my hands, understandably. So I decided to launch that idea into an actual business. So I created Boston AI Learning Hub, and I gave myself the title of Chief AI Educator with the aspiration of eventually having a training staff under me. For right now, it's just me, but what I do is provide one-on-one and group training sessions to teach people how to use generative AI. For example, I gave a talk to Northeastern University 2 weeks ago. Pretty soon, I'm going to talk to a group of CEOs who want to learn more. The service is available for anyone, anywhere in the world, particularly educators and public health professionals. And then two things that have happened since you invited me to this. One, I'm a proofreader at the American Public Health Association Press. So further validation that my writing skills are top notch. And then I'm a proofreader for AI output at Outlier AI. I'm still finalizing the application for that. I've already taken a test through them, but now it's like waiting on the results. If I get that, I'll be analyzing output from AI for safety. So a public health issue in AI.
That's truly awesome, and I love the just the exposure, because even you like going into your doctoral program, you're like, okay, yes, I want to work on mental health, and then not knowing that there was this AI that you can learn more about AI and do your doctoral research around this topic of AI. And I think that's why it's so important just to like get out and talk to people and see what people are doing, because if you didn't know that, we wouldn't be here right now. We won't be talking about chief AI educator and just the importance of AI and how it's like revolutionizing how a lot of things are happening on a day-to-day basis in many ways. So I think like this conversation, and I think the application of you actually using AI to look at your application for your doctoral program is just proof that like it has utility in so many ways, and we just really have to find ways to pick it up and use it and learn more about it, because it's not going to go anywhere. So it is on us to kind of use it. And I know that kind of talks more to like what you were talking around, like the diffusion of innovation bell curve, and ensuring that people on the edges are I guess trying to adopt it quicker than they typically would, so that they aren't like lagging behind.
Yeah, I think that it's extremely important that we realize, one, that we're only scratching the surface of what we can do with it, and two, if you're listening to this podcast and you haven't seen the excitement of AI, then something's wrong. You really gotta change your mind on that.
Absolutely. And so what kind of things are you learning maybe are like the barriers for AI in public health in the workforce, like education and public health workforce?
Yeah, so I'm just now starting to explore that idea with a workplace learning course on designing workplace learning and learning about the barriers that are just common in every field. And that comes down a lot to institutional support for that thing, in this case, AI, and institutional mechanisms that can then help with rolling out infrastructure. So, like, you can't just say, I'm going to incorporate AI into my business tomorrow. You need to adapt policy. You need to come up with ways to train people so that they're using it ethically. There's a lot of different factors that go into it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm even thinking back to like myself and like standard operating procedures. What are the specific questions that we ask and or how we ask it to get the kind of information that we would like? So I see that there's a lot of opportunity, and I believe that there'll be even growing opportunity to learn and really see how you can use AI to better whatever it is you're trying to improve.
Yeah.
What are you most excited for around AI and maybe like specifically AI and your work with the Boston AI Learning Hub?
I am most excited for the chance to make an impression on universities, specifically um, teaching faculty and students. Just this idea that I can go into a school and teach without necessarily being a professor is really exciting because I have a little bit more level of control over what I'm doing. I think that is phenomenal. Um, yeah.
I will agree with that. And I will leave it at there. And more broadly speaking, are there any things like you are very excited about in the AI landscape that we should maybe like start paying attention to?
I mean, GPT-5, the next version of ChatGPT, is coming out hopefully this year. They aren't giving any concrete dates around it, but it's supposed to be next level. Like, whatever it is, it's like a logarithmic curve that it's just getting better. So I honestly don't know, but I'm watching YouTube on a weekly basis for all the new news on AI, and it's not a week goes by that something cool isn't released.
Awesome. So I'm looking forward to the recommendations that you're about to share in a bit. Um, but before we get to that, where can people connect with you and where would you like to see yourself in the future, Pat?
Oh, great question. So you can reach me at pat@bostonailearninghub.org or go to the website, bostonailearninghub.org, or you can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest. Pat Leomi. I think I'm the only one in the world. Um, I see myself in, or did you ask that part of the question? Oh, yes.
Yes.
I see myself working in universities, public health organizations, and other companies, helping develop a plan for adopting generative AI across their organization at every level. And I also would want to be a graduate professor. Those are the two things.
Well, we look forward to seeing all of those things unfold right in front of our eyes. So moving us on to the Furious Five, the five questions that I ask all guests. Number one, what advice would you give to a student trying to pursue a career in public health?
You are pursuing a career in public health clearly because you care about people. Follow that passion. Smoking cessation or mental health support or skin bleaching or whatever, do it because you love it, not because you think it will give you practical skills. I admitted earlier that that is an open thing that you're welcome to do, but I would advise against it. And I wanted to reiterate that no shade toward healthcare management as a profession. Definitely study it if you're passionate about hospitals and healthcare, but not if it'll help with job security.
Number two, if you're talking to someone wanting to get into your position, what advice would you give them?
We've seen a lot of decision points throughout my career, and you're going to face a ton of decision points too. No decision is bad as long as you are moving forward and picking up new skills along the way. I learned so much from my mistakes, and I continue to grow and learn. Um, be open and ask for help frequently and often, and take your time getting to your goal. Public health problems are persistent. They're going to be there in 5 or 10 years. Figure out what moves you and don't be afraid to try.
Number 3, what's something you're working on improving in your life right now?
I'm still coming out of the lows of the pandemic. I've still been pretty depressed, and it's had an impact on my health habits. So I'm trying to become more present with my wife, contribute more around the house, and spend time with people that matter. And I'm just working on it a day at a time.
Wishing you the best in all of those pursuits.
Thank you.
Number 4, professionally, do you recommend anything?
Absolutely. So on YouTube, you can find Jeff Sue, Jeffsu, Matt Wolf with the E at the end, Andy Stapleton, and Steal These Thoughts by Ross Stevenson. That's also a website, is Steal These Thoughts, and he's a very prolific writer on LinkedIn. All these people talk about AI in some form or another, and I get a lot of my news from these sources.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I will definitely try to add some of these into my rotation so I could just stay up to know in what is going on in AI and how it could be helpful.
That'd be great.
So thanks for sharing. Yeah. And then last but not least, if there was one piece of advice you'd give to your younger self, what would it be?
Don't expect to have all the answers right away. Knowledge comes with experience. Explore and try new things, especially if they seem hard or make you feel stupid. That's the only way that you can find out what you're capable of.
Love it. Thank you so much, Pat, for coming on and sharing your journey, your story, and your insights.
Thank you, Omari. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, this was fun. I'm looking forward to continuing to learn more about AI and more about your work as you're becoming more of an expert and a leading subject matter expert in teaching organizations about AI and how they can utilize it.
It's very scary, and I definitely am nervous about it and feel imposter syndrome about it, but it's coming whether or not I feel I'm up for it.
Absolutely. And you will be ready for it. So no stress. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Pat. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Housekeeping items. Thank you for listening. If you're watching this, be sure to hit like on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe if you have not as yet, and share this with a friend. Greatly appreciate it. And leave a 5-star review. I'll see you all next week. Bye, everyone.